house. So who actually killed Brian? We never got a real answer, but before we discuss some conspiracies around this, let's take a step back and see the events that led up to this moment. Stewie and Brian were fleeing a band of hostile Native Americans in jeeps, and pretty much after they escaped, Brian explains that on a trip to Jamestown in the past, they gave the Native Americans guns which were used to wipe out the whites. Now we all know they would originally only have handmade tools such as bow and arrows, knives, axes, etc. So Stewie and Brian giving them these guns changed history, and it backfired on them horribly. Stewie then finds his return pad destroyed by bullets and decides to find the alternative Stewie for help. Going to the equivalent of their house, they find a time machine and pad and return to Jamestown to set things right. As soon as their original counterparts leave, they take back the guns and return to the proper time. And tired of their close calls, Stewie destroys his time machine and crushes the remains at the junkyard, which we all know will turn out to be a huge mistake. And it just so happens that while they were at the junkyard, they end up finding a street hockey net and take it home for exercise. This would also be another terrible mistake because while setting up, Brian is crushed by this car.
Brian, look out!
After this, we are met with this sad scene when the family is at the vet's office. Brian is pretty much near death and the family was saying their goodbyes. He recovers enough to express his love for the family before dying, and this was one of the most saddest scenes in Family Guy history if you ask me.
You've given me a wonderful life. I love you all.
And Stewie was pretty much blaming himself. He gets the idea to rebuild his time machine to save Brian, but unfortunately his dealer is unable to supply him with the needed parts, and he fears Brian is lost for good as the family and friends hold a funeral for him. Now that we have recapped on this episode some, let's discuss this, because this episode aired on November 24th, 2013. Until this day, we still don't have a legit answer behind who killed Brian. While we do know what type of car this murderer drives, which is a 2010 Mercedes-Benz E-Class coupe, it still doesn't give us that much information. If you take a close look at the vehicle, you might also notice the license plate is missing. This leads me to believe the person who did it definitely didn't steal this car to do this crime. They used a personal vehicle. Let me explain. It's been proven that most criminals will steal a random vehicle to do their crimes in, so it will have a less likely chance of tracing back to them. But why would someone bother removing the plates on a car that's stolen, a car that wouldn't trace back to them in the first place? So it has to be a personal vehicle. Now this leads me to my next question. Who's wealthy enough in this show to be able to afford a Mercedes? Like I said earlier, if this episode aired in 2013 and this Benz was a 2010, that's only 3 years old, so this car would still be fairly expensive. So obviously that answer would be Carter, with many saying it could be him based on the fact that Brian pretty much tries to intervene with Carter's unethical money making schemes, but he has never driven this car before. So while that would be an easy answer, we can't really say for sure. He's definitely wealthy enough to own multiple expensive cars that he won't ever drive, but I don't think Carter would be this sloppy if he wanted someone dead. But then again, maybe he didn't care how sloppy he was because Brian is a dog, and he might have thought it would just brush over. So did Carter actually kill this man Brian? We may never know. Let me know your thoughts in the comments though. The next suspect, of course, is Glenn Quagmire, who pretty much hates Brian's guts. This is almost stated every time he's in this man's presence. There's even a particular episode where he dives into the specifics on why he doesn't like Brian. I mean, he just obliterated the man that episode. Not to mention he almost beat Brian to death one episode as well. This is also another conspiracy going around online, but if I had to guess, I would say that even though Quagmire hates this man Brian, I don't think he would murder him. I think that beating was enough.
If I ever see you anywhere near my house, I'll blow your head off!
Some fans even assumed that the driver was Vinny, the dog whom the Griffins adopted a month after Brian's demise, but I don't really see how that would correlate. Some even speculate that it could have been a random drunk driver and could have possibly hit Brian by accident. This also doesn't make sense because it's pretty obvious to me that the person meant to hit Brian. Also, with the license plate missing on top of the driver not stopping, it's clear to me they didn't want the responsibility for what just took place, so they hightailed out of there. This is a pretty interesting and eerie topic, and if you ask me, Carter and Glenn are the obvious suspects. I don't really see anyone else doing this, to be honest. All the other side characters like James Woods, Penelope, even Ernie the chicken, who could have hit Peter where it hurts the most by killing Brian, and neither of those characters make sense either, especially the chicken, because by this point Brian was more cool with Stewie than Peter, so him killing Brian would have made more sense earlier in the show. When one of the writers, this guy here, was asked about why they decided to kill Brian in this episode, he stated, and I quote, "Well, this was an idea that got pitched in the writer's room and it sort of caught fire, and we thought it could be a fun way to shake things up." He also explained why they decided to kill off Brian and not one of the other characters, saying it seemed more in the realm of reality that a dog would get hit by a car than if one of the kids died. And as much as everyone loves their pets, we felt it would be more traumatic to lose one of the kids rather than the family pet. And honestly, I completely agree. Like, imagine them killing Chris or Stewie. Man, people would rage. Hell, I wouldn't like it even if they killed Meg. So Brian was the obvious choice if they were going to kill someone off in the Griffin family. Now, as we all know, 2 episodes later in the episode Christmas Guy, Stewie manages to go back in time to save Brian from being hit.
Brian, look out!
But still, we are left to wonder, who was the driver of this Mercedes that killed Brian? Let me know who you think it could be in the comments down below. And if you would like more chill deep dives to binge, check out these videos here on the screen. But until next time, peace.